In a video released yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the United States has withheld weapons from Israel, which has impeded Israel's progress in taking out Hamas in the Gazan city of Rafah. According to reports, an outraged Biden administration responded by canceling a high-level meeting with Israeli officials scheduled for tomorrow. Now, this comes as the global community continues to attack Israel rather than Hamas. Earlier today, the United Nations Human Rights Office released a report accusing Israel of possible war crimes for its response to a terrorist attack from Hamas. Israel released a statement rejecting the conclusions of this report. Joining me now to discuss this and more regarding Israel is Carolyn Glick. She is a senior contributing editor at the Jewish News Syndicate and host of the Carolyn Glick Show on JNS. Carolyn, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always great to see you.
It's always terrific to be on your program, Tony. Thanks for having me back.
So I want to get your reaction to the video from the Prime Minister and the White House's response to his message that the Biden administration is withholding important munitions and weapons.
So Prime Minister Netanyahu wouldn't have given that message if he didn't feel that it was absolutely necessary. And the Biden administration's response, which was really effectively to have a temper tantrum against the prime minister and insult him in just the most obnoxious ways, I think it speaks to the validity of what he was saying, because it was very interesting. He said that the Biden administration has been holding up these arms that we need and that will allow us to finish the war quickly. And then the Biden administration said, we're only holding up a shipment of JDAMs of 2,000-pound bombs, and because for political reasons, because we're accusing Israel of wrongly using them, when we know that that's not true. Even the Pentagon said that that's not true. But all the same, that's what they said, and they used that as a justification for saying Netanyahu doesn't know what he's talking about. But they just acknowledged that he was telling the truth when they said we're only withholding this one shipment as if it's one bomb. These are thousands of bombs that they are not sending on to Israel. And there was a very big shipload of weapons that was actually released to be sent to Israel after he made the statement. So it's very clear that he was able to open a bottleneck, and that he did, in fact, hit on the only way to open up that bottleneck, which was to expose what was going on. So on the one hand, they acknowledged that he was telling the truth. On the other hand, they said that he was lying. And then underneath it all, they actually were releasing extremely important shipments of arms that Israel requires. So that's what happened.
I want to quote directly from the Prime Minister from his video. He says, "It is inconceivable that in the past few months the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel, giving us the tools that will finish the job a lot faster," as you pointed out. Now, this comes with the backdrop of the Biden administration partially lifting a ban on Ukraine using U.S. arms on Russian territory. I mean, this doesn't make sense, where the Biden administration is telling Ukraine, yeah, you can go ahead and use our munitions to strike directly into Russia, but at the same time tying the hands of our most strategic ally, Israel. How do you square that?
I mean, the only way you can square that is by calling things by what they are. I mean, the administration is advancing a policy that opposes Israeli victory in this war. They're willing to allow Israel to defend itself, but the only way that we can defend ourselves is by going on offense and actually defeating our enemies. And that's something that the White House does not want to countenance, that will not countenance, whether it's in relation to Hamas or it's in relation to Hezbollah, which is the looming threat in the north. It's not actually looming, it's escalating before our eyes. And Israel has to expand its military operations into Lebanon with ground forces in order to bring it back to scale, to make life livable again in northern Israel.
Let's talk about that, because Hamas, and we have discussed this before, but it's not really being talked about much in the legacy media here in the United States. Hamas is small compared to what lies ahead with Hezbollah in the north. And we still have upwards of 80,000 residents in Israel displaced from their homes as a result of the almost daily rocket attacks, missile attacks coming in from Lebanon.
Right. They gave their terrorists a couple of days off for the Islamic holiday that they celebrated this week, but it's every day. Israel is being shelled every day, and it's civilian homes that are being shelled. Over 1,000 of them have been destroyed since, over the months of the Hezbollah missile offensive. But it's not only that; it's military bases, it's forest preserves, it's agriculture, and most important from a military perspective, it's also strategic sites in Israel. Just yesterday, Hezbollah released drone footage of their drone taking pictures of strategic sites over Haifa, over the Gulf of Haifa, the Haifa port, etc. So we're talking about a strategic threat that, in fact, given the fact that Hezbollah has 150,000 projectiles pointed at Israel, more if you count their drones, which you should, um, they rise to the level of a nuclear threat against Israel. The amount of firepower they can bring to bear in a full-scale war, we're looking at 3,000 to 4,000 missiles falling on Israel or being shot at Israel, from Lebanon every single day for weeks. So this is a threat that rises to the level of a nuclear assault, just without the nuclear aftershock.
So this is not theoretical. This is happening. It has been happening since October. There is no future for Israel as a free and a safe nation without addressing this threat, is there?
No, no. I mean, Hezbollah is actually the biggest threat aside from Iran's nuclear project. And look, like you said, we have 80,000 Israeli civilians who are internal refugees. They're living in hotels. Today, Hezbollah General Secretary Hassan Nasrallah gave this speech where he said they're not going to be allowed to go back to their homes until I let them, and that's going to be a long time from now. So nobody's going to live at his pleasure in Israel, right? And it's because he wants to kill all of us first and foremost, and also because that's impossible. So, you have to wipe that smirk off his face. And the only way that you do that, unfortunately, is by having, again, to send our forces into battle in Lebanon to, foot by foot, mile by mile, push Hezbollah away from the border. Because those 85,000 Israeli internal refugees, including our uncles in our family, they're not going to be able to go home until we massively scale back Hezbollah's power. And nobody's going to do that. Not the Lebanese armed forces, which are an auxiliary force of Hezbollah, not the UNIFIL forces, the UN forces that act at the pleasure of Hezbollah. The only military force capable of doing that is the Israeli military, unfortunately. And as a result, we're going to have to take military action inside of Lebanon with our ground forces in the very near future.
Carolyn, let's talk about that internal war footing there in Israel with Benny Gantz stepping aside and the dissolving of the war cabinet. A lot is being made of that here in the United States in terms of that weakening the prime minister. What's it really like? What does this mean going forward?
It doesn't mean anything in terms of the stability of the government. The left and a lot of the people in the United States, I saw Tom Friedman in the New York Times writing about it yet again today, want very badly to overthrow Netanyahu. It's funny because the same forces, they have no problem. They want to oust Netanyahu from power and leave Hamas in charge of Gaza. So it shows you where their brain is. But they want to oust Netanyahu, so they're making it seem as though Benny Gantz's departure from the war cabinet is going to destabilize the government. But we had a stable 64-member majority coalition of making up the government before October 7th and before Benny Gantz came in on October 11th, and that coalition still remains now. And in fact, it's stabilized by his departure because he was undermining a lot of the ministers there who felt very upset and felt unseated and disenfranchised by Benny Gantz. So I don't think you're going to see any major instability in Israel.
Let's talk just for a moment the political environment there. Again, the legacy media talk about the demonstrations against the prime minister. But it's interesting, many of these organizers and these demonstrators are the same ones who were demonstrating prior to October 7th over his judicial reforms. Is this outside agitation?
I mean, it's the exact same people who have been demonstrating against Netanyahu since 2019, over this and then over that and then over the other thing. These people just want Netanyahu out. They're very much like Thomas Friedman and key members of the Biden administration, I dare say. But, it never works for them, because the more that they pressure Israel, particularly now, the more pressure that Israel gets to capitulate to Hamas, to stand down against Hezbollah and effectively cede sovereignty over northern Israel to Hamas's Foreign Legion in Lebanon, the more supported the prime minister is, and the more the people rally around the government. Because what we found in successive surveys, and I just had a long conversation about this with one of Israel's leading pollsters this evening. The public wanted, after October 7th, two things. They wanted national unity and they wanted victory in the war. And when the war cabinet and the sort of national war emergency government with Benny Gantz began to destabilize, because Benny Gantz kept making noises and threatening to leave, the public started getting polled about, what do they prefer? National unity, which means appeasing Gantz and giving up on the idea of total victory in the war, or remaining, constant with the commitment to victory in the war. And what you found was that around 60% of Israelis said no, they value victory in the war over Benny Gantz's remaining in the government. So, it's important. National unity is very important to Israelis. But more important than that is the survival of our people and the survival of our country. And I think that there's a widespread understanding among Israelis that this is a war for our national survival. And we simply can't place anything above that in our list of priorities. So the prime minister is clearly moving in that direction. And anybody who seems to be faltering or does falter or abandons that is no longer supported by the public.
Carolyn, that seems to be my read. Of course, I'm not nearly as close to that as you are, but there's a sense that we win or else. There's no in between, and it's whatever is required to go that distance. So while this has been going on for 8 months, if it has to go on for 12 months, if it has to go on for 24 months, my sense is there's the majority of the Israeli people realize it has to be done.
Not everybody. The majority of Israelis recognize that this is a zero-sum game. Either we stay alive and they die, or they're defeated and their ability to kill us is removed, or we're dead. I mean, there's no getting to yes. There's no happy middle. There's no way of squaring this circle. We are facing genocidal foes. They showed that very clearly on October 7th. And people saw that, and people recognized what we just experienced. Nobody was able to delude themselves into thinking that what happened was something else. And that understanding is sustained because we love our children as much as we love them on October 7th. And nobody is going to do anything, or 60% of Israelis are convinced that we have no option other than to follow the course to victory, regardless of the cost.
Carolyn, final question for you. With that backdrop, how are Israelis looking to America's falls, the election taking place this fall in America?
I think that the sense among Israelis is that the American election is playing into the American antagonism, meaning, it was one thing when most Israelis trusted Biden and felt that he was our ally in this war, and that he meant it when he said that he had Israel's back and that his commitment to Israel's security was ironclad, and we had disagreements about how to prosecute the war. But what Israelis have seen over the past 3 months, more or less, is that Biden is openly hostile to Israel's goal of victory. And the widespread sense among Israelis is that what's motivating him is not some sort of a substantive, understandable, rational disagreement about tactics to reach the common end with Netanyahu, but rather his electoral fortunes. And, Israeli parents aren't willing to endanger their children just to help Biden win in Michigan.
Yeah,
so I think that there's a sense.
Nor should they be. Carolyn, we could continue this conversation, but it would be just you and I, because we're about to go. The program's about to come to an end, but I want to thank you as always for joining us. Always great to talk with you.